What's up, everyone, and welcome to the RRBG podcast. In this episode, I talked to Aric Improta of Night Verses and Fever 333. We talked about his career, we talked about his regimen to keep up with the drumming the way that he performs live, which is a very exciting physical performance. We talked about Fever 333 opening up for Slipknot. We talked about Night Verses writing new music. We talked about his approach to music in general. We talked about him playing with greats like Justin Chancellor from Tool and DJ Lethal, and collaborating with many, many artists. We talked about his love and passion for music and art. It was a really, really great conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure to follow him on all the things at Aric Improta. That's Aric with an A. Make sure to check out Fever 333 and Night Verses. Go check out his artwork, which we also talk about on the show. He has an illustration page on Instagram at HexWave, so check that out as well. If you get a chance, subscribe to our show. Hit the little bell so you get notifications when we have new videos. Follow us on Instagram and all the socials. And check out our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/RRBG and support the podcast. Cheers. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the RRBG podcast. I am being joined by Aric Improta. How are you, brother?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm okay. We were just talking before we started here. I kind of woke up yesterday feeling a little under the weather, which is now a scary thing when before it was just a simple like maybe some vitamin C, maybe a throat lozenge, but now I feel like if I don't get checked out and go to the hospital I might die. So yeah, man. How did you before we get into everything that you're doing, I mean, how are you? How is your mental health? I know we're kind of back to normal, but not really. So how are you feeling?
I'm good, dude. I don't know. When everything locked down and whatever else, I just kind of took it as an opportunity to work on things that I couldn't normally. So during all of quarantine, I was like the busiest I've ever been. And then now that things are opening up, it's exciting to remember how nice it is to play shows, to be able to travel. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, I feel very lucky. I only got COVID once and my effects weren't too gnarly. So it was like, I don't know. I feel like that window of time was a good opportunity for me and my friends to kind of like focus on creativity without having like the time limits that we normally have. So now that that's kind of passed, it's exciting to get back out into the world and get to share the stuff that we've been working on and remember what it's like to have like on stage adrenaline versus live stream adrenaline or whatever else. So I'm glad to be out, but I did enjoy, I don't mean to say that because I know a lot of people had like a hard time at that point, but I did enjoy getting to like hole up and like focus on work and I guess in a different sort of mindset.
No, yeah, you're a very creative guy. I mean, from what I see on Instagram, what I see from your work and YouTube videos and everything. So I imagine, you put it to good use. A lot of people did. I mean, I myself, like this show didn't even have video before the pandemic.
Oh,
so
really?
It was just an audio podcast. And then I'm like, well, can't really meet up with people for podcasts anymore. So got to figure out how to do that.
Totally. Well, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I've got a few friends that do podcasts and it seems like they've taken off in the pandemic because I mean, in some ways it's almost like a replacement for the social interaction that everybody was lacking because you get to hear a different side of the people that are being interviewed, like the fact that it's more of a casual conversation versus like an interview done in 5 minutes on a red carpet or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, man. I watched the Grammy Awards not too long ago and they did interviews with like the dudes from Mastodon and Chino. And they all looked so disinterested, like, yep, we're here. And like the girls that were interviewing, no disrespect, but they had no idea who they were interviewing. So they were just like, tell us about your project. And he's like, what do you mean, the Deftones? Like,
I think I'm pretty sure I saw this clip actually.
Oh my God.
And it's funny because I think just through all forms of art, because I think interviewing and podcasting completely can be considered a form of art. Like, it just starts to update over time, and if you're stuck in that old format, as time continues to move on, it just starts to feel more and more dated. And I'm not saying that they should be doing podcasts,
no, right,
casual hour-long conversations, the red carpet, but in general, you're totally right. Like if you have an artist like that has that much depth to their catalog, it's a little weird to see you just casually be like, so sum up your band or your project for me within these 30 seconds. It's like, it's so much deeper than that. Both of those bands have put so much out artistically and evolved over the years. It's like, how do you sum that up in a 20-second answer?
Yeah, man. I wanted to ask you, and then this is not a political question. I'm not asking to stir any kind of problem, but did you get the vaccine for everything?
I did. I mean, basically I had not had it when I got COVID.
Oh, okay.
And I was fine. I mean, knock on wood that I don't have some crazy long-term effects, but as far as like that. And then when we got offered a tour to go out with Slipknot, it was part of the requirement. And I was just like, let's go. Like, I don't know enough about studying the body to sit there and debate. So I was like, let's try this first couple rounds and see how it goes. And then we did the tour and everything seemed to work out.
Yeah. The only reason I was asking is because I've heard some folks, and even myself a little bit, post-shot, like the cardio has been an issue. And I know you're a big health guy, so I was wondering if you felt any changes in your cardio or like your endurance while doing live shows after the fact.
No, I mean, I've had some weird heart stuff, but I can't tell if that's the fact, like caffeine or something. Like when I went to the doctor about it, and they were like, this seems like something that's coming up from like too much I don't even drink that much caffeine, to be honest. I have like 1 cup of coffee a day, but they kept saying it was that. That was the only thing that I really had noticed the difference in. But you know, it's like it's hard to tell if that would have happened before or after anyway. So I'm conscious of it, but I'm not pretending like I did this deep level of research where I could pinpoint this is exactly what caused it, you know? Sure,
man. Yeah. And you know, anybody that I've talked to so many people about it, and you know, people get all angry about the vaccine. It's like, guys, you need, if it's necessary for work, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? It's kind of like gasoline.
And I think it's your choice, right? Totally. And I think it's your choice. Like if you're like, nah, it's not worth it for me, whatever, I'm not going to do it. Like, I don't know, man. I think it's a situation where people are trying to do their best, and there wasn't a solution. And maybe in 6 months, they'll have like an over-the-counter remedy for it.
Oh, that'd be
and
great.
Then all those people that held out will have another solution. And then it's like, you don't have to make someone compromise their beliefs about their body or whatever, you know, like I'm just kind of like, whatever solutions we can come up with to move forward, figure it out. So anybody that got the vaccine, that's good, sick.
Yeah. Go
back to work. Awesome. Anybody that was like really, really, really strongly believing that they want to like hold out and see other options, I hope they find other options like this, the whole debate and everything else. Again, I don't have enough education on this specific subject to sit here and tell people what they should and shouldn't do. Made the best guess for myself, and I hope everybody else has an option to where they feel comfortable doing it, you know?
Yeah, man. I wish more people thought like you. We would be in a more peaceful, more peaceful world.
I don't know, man. I mean, again, I know people have great reasons for getting it and whatever else, and I'm not opposed to that. I mean, I'm vaccinated, but I don't feel qualified to speak on what people should and shouldn't do.
Well, I'm glad that it hasn't really affected your cardio, because I mean, that's, you know, apart from your incredible talent playing the drums, like part of the thing that you do also is just these ridiculous physical performances. I mean, you're jumping up, you're doing spins, you're doing backflips, you're grabbing onto whatever, you know, guardrail you can get your hands on, and you're screaming back there. So, I mean, any detriment to that would, you know, obviously affect your performance, you know?
Totally.
So I wanted to ask you, before we get into some more music stuff, I saw some of your artwork, your illustrations were, you have a label for it called HexWave.
Yeah.
How did that, I mean, did you take art classes in your youth, or is it more something that just happened?
Well, my dad was an artist that designed for Disney for 15 years, and he did the set design and art direction for that show Married to Children for 13 years.
Oh my God, that's one of my favorite shows.
Really? Yeah. So dude. He was always really good, and I guess I just always had that reference point of like, there's a certain level to where you can be professional, and anything below that, it's cool, it's self-expression, but it's not like I didn't like draw a circle and be like, oh my God, I'm going to be an artist. You know, I had this reference to where there's a certain level of expectation. So, my dad did that. And then my parents both value art like very, very deeply. Like, it's like family first, and then art second, and music, and then whatever else comes after, you know. And my mom is a drama teacher, so she was all about theater, and they played in a cover band on the weekends just for fun. Like they're not trying to make it or anything, but they just loved, like their big thing was vocal harmony. So I would walk into the house all the time and they would be like harmonizing Beatles songs and everything else. So that was kind of just this inherent part of life. I guess the way that some people would just go to church on Sunday or whatever else. And I hadn't really I drew for fun, but I didn't really take it seriously until I was 18 and I had just graduated high school. I was going to college, trying to get out of college to tour, but I didn't have any tours and our bands weren't good enough yet. And I was working at the YMCA at an after school program, and I had a boss that basically just saw me in the downtime of like homework and was like, you should start sketching. So from then I was sketching like an hour a day for 7 years, because I was at the Y for 7 years, and on and off towards the end when I was on tour. So from that, I just started to kind of take it seriously. And then now it's been cool to try and find ways to integrate that into drumming and music in general. So it's like, not only do I get to do it on the drum heads with Remo, but I've gotten to work on merch for Night Verses and also other stuff. And for me, anytime you can combine sort of different facets of your artistic expression into one thing, it's like to me, it's like a deeper view you can give your listener, fans, or whatever, of who you are. Like I remember as a kid seeing that Adam Jones was doing the makeup and stuff for those Tool videos. And that was so cool to me. Like the idea of the artist having control over the artwork felt way more authentic to me than them just hiring somebody that could take cool photos, you know?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as long as the musician has the ability to create.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, I know
totally.
Most musicians have very creative minds, obviously, because you're creating music, you're creating art. That was always one of my things as well. Like you mentioned that, like when I was in a band, I always did all the artwork for the shirts and the album covers.
Really? That's awesome.
Because I had ideas. I wasn't very good. You know what I mean? Like this stuff behind me is not me. That's all guests, you know, people, friends and fans that send it over. But yeah, I always struggled with hand drawing and was really good with like manipulating things on Photoshop and all that other things.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think it's hard sometimes to like when you're in the process of making the music, sometimes it's hard to articulate that to an artist, like what you know it's supposed to feel like and sound like. And sometimes you're giving them demos that are like unfinished, saying match this vibe. And so if you're a part of that process and then you also can sort of find something you're happy with to visually represent the art, then it's like, it's hard to beat that, you know?
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, some of the art that I saw, it was very like mandala kind of, you know, trippy looking. Is that something that you explore? Not, you know, to say psychedelics or anything like that, but just the inner workings of the mind, you know, the introspective and meditative aspects of life that I see that in your art. I just don't know if that's what you're trying to express.
You know, it's a good question. I love when people ask questions I've never been asked before, by the way. So that was a good one. For me, I started with mandalas because when I first started drawing, I wasn't good. Like I knew I wasn't good. It wasn't like a surprise. I wasn't trying to trick myself. So I would try and find work that I thought was beautiful, but the actual pieces that made up that work weren't difficult to draw. So like henna patterns and mandalas were some of the first things where it's like, I know I can draw the different shapes to build this thing out. It's more about understanding the balance of lines. So for me, I think that was motivating because it's not like I had to know how to draw a human face and shade right away. It's like I could make something that looked cool, and it was more about my curation of simple lines than me being like an expert at what I'm doing. And then obviously as I did that over time, I started to develop different techniques to make it come to life more. But I started with that, and I started with I would like do the squiggle thing where you draw a squiggle and then turn it into a drawing. Okay. Because I wanted to be able to problem solve. And that's something that helps me out now, because if I'm drawing on like the body of a guitar, or like as I'm painting, a giant like blot goes on the guitar and it looks screwed up, I now have like hours and hours under my belt of turning one thing into something else. So that's kind of where it started. But for me, I've never done drugs. I've never drank in my life. And at the same time, it's like I'm so fascinated with surrealist art, and I do meditate. My fiance is a yoga instructor, and we've done a number of classes, I've done workshops on it just for myself, to kind of like, get your mind centered, especially when you're on tour and you're dealing with a bunch of stuff all at once.
Yeah.
But as far as like the artwork, I love coming up with things that surprise me, as far as like I haven't seen this before, or this shape or this pattern, or like just pulling something out of myself that's not, I don't know the reference. Like, I think it's very easy to look at one thing and another and say, how do I put these together? It's another thing to like start with something very basic and see where it goes. And I love that process. Same thing with making music or anything else. Like, I think surrealism, it's always been present in art, but I think it's almost needed more now than ever, because especially at this day and age, human beings have been like educated in a way to where it's all about recognizing patterns, and it's not about just like letting things come out of you and seeing where they go. And so you notice it, like anytime somebody talks about a record, they try and describe it as like, oh, it's Mastodon meets Deftones, or it's Mars Volta meets this. And like, it's almost like difficult for people to just go on that journey and see what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So I feel like with visual art specifically, because I don't have to work with anybody else, I just do it by myself. I try and maintain that. And with mandalas, it's a great way to do it, because you're starting from a center and then just working your way out.
Interesting. That's great. Yeah. I've always told people that the effects that certain drugs like psychedelics do to people can be achieved without them,
Yeah. I've never done drugs, but I've heard that from people that have.
Yeah. Like the meditation can achieve, you can achieve that kind of state where you see certain patterns and see more into your mind, and it can be achieved without. I consider it a tool, but it can also be abused. It's very easy for it to be abused. That's also why I don't recommend it to people. I mean, unless you've already done it, it's one of those things.
And I get the appeal in the sense of like, when I do get to that point with a piece of art where I feel like I never would have expected this to come out this way or whatever, like it feels great. So I would imagine whatever you're doing, like whatever is happening where people are sort of opening that door instantly, I can imagine that would be great. But for me, I always want to be responsible for all the things in my life, for my actions and for the artwork that I'm doing and everything else. And so that's just the reason I never got into it. But like, some of my favorite musicians that I've worked with are all about it. And they create great work, and I'm not here to tell them that they should stop doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that some of them make better work when they were on it and then when they were sober, but that's neither here nor there. I just, it's funny that you mentioned that now, and it makes more sense to me, because I haven't, I would consider, and not to blow too much smoke, but you are insanely talented. Like the drums stuff that you do on your Instagram, with the creativeness of it, because it's not like super, it's not proggy time signature stuff that some people get bored with. It's just creative. You're playing
so much,
you're playing with different ways, like you put your foot on the snare, like you're trying to create new sounds, and that kind of creativity and sharpness and focus only comes from either you're doing a lot of drugs or you've never done them before. You know what I mean?
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like I just don't, it's hard to explain. I mean, it shouldn't be hard to explain, but like, I talk to so many people and they don't just lock themselves in a room and find it. It's like it's so easy now to pull up a YouTube video and go like, that's a cool fill, I'll learn it, or whatever else. And I don't know, for me, sometimes it's a detriment, because I'm always creating in the moment. So I don't always have it to reference back. Like, I have a lot of friends that are great at what they do, and if you want them to like rip a solo on the spot, they've got their tricks that they know they can do. Like for me, like I find things and I work on them for a month, and I get them to a point where I'm happy, and then I might never play it again. And like, that's why we're lucky that we have video at this day and age, and the internet it's like, I always just feel like if I made something special, as long as it's documented, it exists forever. And then I don't need to go back to it unless I choose to. Whereas, back in the day, the only way to do that was to end up in clubs. So it's like, you had to have these things that reference all the time, because your moment was live in front of people, and it changed city to city. And I value that too. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love playing shows. I toured like 250 days, like 2017 through 19, right before everything dropped. Like each year it was that much. So I'm all about that. I love live performance, but I think that video brings another dynamic because you have the freedom to just create something, work really hard, and then never go back to it because it's like a recording, right? Like a record, it always exists for people to listen to.
Yeah, man. I think it all comes down to your openness to play around, because some people get kind of locked in their heads of like, well, you know, I have to do these certain rudiments or these certain patterns or something that I learned in school, and they don't allow themselves to play and experiment with different sounds and different ways. They get self-conscious about it. They're like, well,
Totally.
I shouldn't have my foot on the snare. You know, like,
No, totally. And you know what? Like what the internet at the same time doesn't help because you got people bitching about like what you're doing and how you're doing it. Like I see people that'll tell me like, why do you lift your arms above your head? It's so unnecessary and inefficient. And I don't know. To me, this is not a hard concept, but like art is just supposed to be self-expression, however that is, you know. So if you play a certain way, if you want to adapt someone else's vocabulary, that's your choice. If you just want to make noises and do whatever comes most naturally, that's also just as correct in the process. So for me, I've always felt that way. And a lot of the artists that I really, really love and look up to don't sound like anybody else. But again, it's like I was talking about before, there's so much in pattern recognition, and there's so much now, like you get validation when people go like, oh, he did a blushta here. Oh, like that's a blast beat at 240 BPM. Like there's so much code and all these other things that people do to say like, oh, that counts as good. Even YouTube videos where they talk about like, why is this song good? To me, it's like, I get it, but if you listen to it and you like it, or you make it and it feels good to you, just run with that. Like don't try and classify it and make sure it's cool before you put it out there.
Yeah, man. This is good because I like it. I think that's my barometer. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I didn't immediately turn it off. You're holding the stick wrong, man. You're holding the stick wrong. You're supposed to grip it like this and like put your fingers down here so you can do this thing. It's like, come on, man. Do whatever you want. Whatever makes you happy, whatever works and you feel creative with.
And I will say, like, after I get that initial enjoyment, I do like to deep dive into that, right? Like I'll be like, what is it about this that drew me to it? Like, is there something in this that I don't understand? Like I do all that stuff after, don't get me wrong. But like off the bat, if you're like looking for things that you want before just openly experiencing it, I think that kind of like, for me, it ruins the process. Again, to each their own. But for me, it's like I so many outlets now, they try and lead with the story first, right? Like you watch, my parents will watch like The Voice or American Idol, and they'll give this whole background story as to their struggles and everything else first before you even hear the music. And for me, it's not that stuff isn't interesting, but like I want to know I like it before I care about any of that other stuff. Like I want to hear it and feel it, and then if I go into it, it's interesting, but I don't want to be sold this piece of art before I've even seen it or felt it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. I want to move on away from the drug talk, but I did have one last question regarding it, and you don't have to answer it, but is there a particular reason? Because I know a lot of the folks that I've spoken to that don't use have had like an experience, like a traumatic experience with a family member or lost someone. Like, is there a reason? Because it takes a lot of effort, especially when you're on tour. It's everywhere. Everybody's smoking weed, everybody's drinking, and the temptations are there, and it takes a really strong will to say no. And a lot of it, what I've noticed is the folks that say no mostly is because they have a very strong reason, like, well, I lost my father, or I lost a cousin.
Right.
So is there any reason, or is just kind of was never part of your life?
No, you know what? I mean, again, like everybody has their reason, like you're saying, whether they do it or don't. For me, I got so much excitement. I guess there's a lot of reasons, but I got so much excitement out of the things that I enjoyed in my life, like music and getting to jam with my friends and everything else. And I just always assume like nobody plans on being an addict. Mm-hmm. Nobody goes into it thinking I'm going to be stuck doing this and spend all my money doing it. So because that happens so often, I was like, I don't know where I'm going to fall in this. So if I'm doing all these things that make me happy, whether it's skateboarding or drawing or making music, like I'm not curious enough to go find out if I'm going to be one or the other. And I think maybe because I had art in my life so early on, that was a huge factor to where I already knew something that made me happy, where I was like, I don't need something that's going to make me happier than this. But also, my parents never drank and smoked, and they're very content, and they led by example. It wasn't like they said don't do something and then did it on their own, you know? So even at like parties, it's not, we just didn't have it around. So it wasn't something that I associated with like fun, where I was like, oh, when I get older, I'm going to do this. So yeah, I mean, I had friends. I think I first had friends starting to smoke when I was in like seventh grade, so like 12. But I don't know. I was trying to get better at drums. That was my pride. And skateboarding. I wasn't worried about the other stuff.
That's cool, man. That's great. I mean, there's also that aspect, maybe subconsciously, of like, you know, you throw yourself into your work so much, like your art and your drumming, that, you know, maybe there is that subconscious fear that if you were to try it, you would throw yourself at it in the same intensity. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I don't know. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like that's why when like, I can't ever speak on how hard it would be to quit, because it's way easier to not do it if you've never tried it, I would imagine. But I just knew that. And I do have a pretty, like you're saying, a pretty, I don't know if addictive is the right word, but like strong draw to the things that I love. So like when I was a kid, when I was like 17, 18, I started practicing 5 hours a day. And that's the type of stuff that, you know, I'm glad it went towards something that I could use later in life versus other avenues I could have gone down, I guess.
I actually have that here in my notes. I wanted to ask you, how many hours a day are you drumming these days?
Dude, I wish I could do 5 hours a day now. It's very difficult, because there's so many things I wish I had at that time that I have now, and I have to take advantage of them, like being able to collaborate with certain people, as far as like doing art pieces that are like working with Vans, or getting to work with Schecter guitars or Remo. And all of that's really fun for me. And it is a new part of my life where, like, when I was drawing and I was younger, I didn't have that option. And then writing with Night Verses is a lot of my time. But in general, I used to know I didn't have any of those options. So I'm like, all I can do to prepare for that is practice 5 hours a day. I didn't know I couldn't tour. Like, no, we weren't getting booked for anything. So at that time, I knew that was my advantage. Like, I remember I had a brief moment where my friend's band started touring Europe, and their drummer was great, but I felt, again, at the age of 18, I felt like I was better than him. So I was asking myself, like, why does he get to tour and I don't, blah, blah, blah. And that lasted about 5 minutes, sitting on the computer looking at their photos on like MySpace. And then I just kind of sat there and was like, well, you know, he now doesn't have 5 hours a day to practice, and I do. So I'm going to use this window to get as far as I can. And then the minute that I get to start touring, then I've got to move into that world. And I'm so glad I did. But the minute that I started touring, I felt like, okay, I don't have that time anymore. So I would say now there's days when I do 5 and 6 hours straight. And then there'll be like 3 days straight where I don't get to touch a drum set because I'm doing a commissioned guitar. Or, I mean, I'll work on music every day, but sometimes I'm driving to Nick's house from Night Verses, or going to Steve from Fever's spot, and I'll just be next to them, like programming stuff for them to write over, and then I'll go home and work on it on the kit the next day. So it's like, it's not as much of a regiment as it used to be. And I really do, like, I miss that. Like, I hope I get at least another like year or two in my life when I'm financially free enough to go, like, I want to get that much better at this instrument and just commit to doing that again. Cause it was an awesome phase of my life, even though it didn't always feel like it. Like, getting to dedicate to that and like form this like sort of artistic relationship with an instrument was a really important part of my process.
Yeah, man. And shout out to Nick. That's my homie.
Oh, you know Nick?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're good friends. Yeah, I've known Nick for a while. I'm trying to remember where we met, but it's been a few years. I think we met at a show, at a Night Versus.
Oh, really?
At a Night Versus show. I think maybe with Let Live back in the day.
Oh, this is a while ago. Yeah.
A long time ago. But yeah, he and I, we've played Call of Duty together.
Oh, that's awesome. Dude, Nick is, I mean, it's hard to say this because I've been lucky enough to work with so many talented people, but Nick is like my favorite musician. Like jamming with him, and obviously I'm biased because I've gotten to jam with him since we were 12 years old and we're now 32.
Wow.
But
That's a long time.
I still write with Nick every single week from 12 till now. And like, he's the most prolific, especially in the last couple of years. He wasn't always this way, but he's the most prolific musician I know, and he never burns out of writing. Like, if as long as like you're there and you're focused and you're not just throwing him bullshit ideas, like that dude can come up with anything. And it's cool because his process is so interesting. Like, if you say make something like this, he hardly listens to it. Like, he just goes off of what the first 10 seconds feels like, and then it's whatever comes out. And then if you say try 10 other versions of that, he'll come up with 10 other versions without thinking. It's like, so it's so cool to be around. And like, I try and write with him as much as possible because I hope we get to make music till we're 70, but you never know when certain things change or whatever else. So it's like, I to this day still try and take advantage of getting to work with him and Riley, the bass player of Night Versus, as much as I possibly can. Yeah. Like, that's all my free time when it's not hanging out with my fiance or working on stuff that makes money, is writing with them, because it's like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, man, he is a riff writing machine. I see him on Twitch all the time, just coming up with songs. I'm just like, how do you do it?
Dude, his work on New Night Versus too is like, in my opinion, is a huge step up. And I love the stuff he's doing, and he's gotten better and better. Like, the fact that he wrote more than 160 songs live over quarantine is insane.
Yeah.
But some of the solos and stuff he's doing on the new record are like just so tasteful. And again, with Twitch, he does it more as like a brainstorming thing. Like, he just throws it out there and puts it together. But the stuff he's been working on, like, I'm very excited for people to hear. Me and Riley have some stuff that I think is cool on there, but I think Nick kind of steals the show on this record. So I'm stoked for it to be out eventually.
I'm excited to see it, man. I mean, I've fell in love with you guys back in the day when Doug was still in the band, and just the performance aspect of it was very intense. Everyone was giving it their all, but on top of that, the creativity in the music, because it's hard to explain it to folks, because it has prog elements, but it's also kind of emo-ish, kind of, I don't know how to explain it. It's just it has everything. It's accessible. What was the album that had Vanta Black on it?
That was Into the Vanishing Light.
Yeah, like that one had so many experimental things to it, and kind of off into like The Cure almost, that kind of vibe. We did that with Ross Robinson, so yeah. He is definitely a huge influence on that record. Yeah, man. And then after Doug's departure, you guys went instrumental, and then it got even more intense and more more proggy in that sense of notes, like much more notes. And I don't know. I sound dumb when I speak about music.
No, you don't.
Because I don't know.
Doug was a big presence, so we had to add more notes to make up for him not being there.
Yeah, man.
We love Doug, and we had a lot of fun in the time that we worked with him. But when we had decided to kind of just go our separate ways, and he's still one of my best friends, but we'd always kind of like overwritten songs and then had to pull things back to make sure we had room for vocals. And to be fair, Doug did a great job of dealing with that, because he'd show up and like we'd be like shredding through a chorus and he would still find a way to sing something cool over it. But when we decided to kind of do our own thing, it was like, it just felt really natural to move that way. So I feel fortunate that our fans seem to have been down for both eras. And it's cool because like it wasn't anything weird. Like we figured it out, and Doug came to a Night Versus show the last time he was living in California, and I still talk to him probably like once every couple weeks, and he's awesome.
Nice, man. Now, and I'm sure you've probably spoken about this on other podcasts or interviews or whatever, but I know that the connection with Jason from Let Live is probably what led to Fever. But just kind of, how did that whole venture go from like, all right, well, I'm going to join another band that's also active. So you have two active bands, how did that all come about for you?
It was a crazy time in my life. I was coming out of we were writing from the Gallery of Sleep. So we were writing the instrumental record, and Jason and Letlive had just sort of gone their own ways. And Jason wrote 2 songs with Travis Barker and John Feldman. John Feldman was the singer of Goldfinger, and then he became a producer, and great producer. And the opposite of Ross Robinson, I love them both, but it's funny because going from Ross to John, it's like opposite sides of the spectrum as far as their process. Both just as good at what they do, but it was an interesting switch. So they had written 2 songs, and then Jason had reached out because they were like, these songs are cool, we should get a band. And I don't think when they said that, they knew that they were going to get, Jason was going to get someone like me and Stevis. I think when they said like, you should get a band, it was just like, get some homies and play these songs. But Jason had asked me to come down because he's like, oh, I think I know the guy I want. And it was a crazy process. And I have talked about this one before, but this is like this story just has always been a little crazy for me. So he had called me and he was like, hey, I want you to meet John. And he kind of explained to me that they were working on this stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. And I said, do I need to learn anything? And he's like, nah, it's just to meet him. So I drove up to Calabasas, which was like 3 hours through traffic. And right before we got in there, we were in a parking lot and he showed me one song that they had written. Because up to that point, they wrote Animal and We're Coming In. And he showed me Animal and he was like, yeah, so this is the song we're working on. And he's like, just so you know, John's kind of intense. He's probably had a few shots of espresso. He's not being rude or anything. That's just how he is. And I was like, okay. So we get in, walk into the room, and it's a super nice studio, home studio in the hills of Calabasas. And his neighbors are like Travis Barker and that level of celebrity. And we go in there and his team is like, sorry, John is sick, so he's not going to be here today. And Jason's like, well, why did we have Aric come? And they're like, oh, we want him to record. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't know any of these songs. And then John bursts into the room with a camera crew. And he was like, hey, I totally forgot I'm shooting my documentary today. So my name's John. Are you ready to record? So now I'm like on camera. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And and so he was like, what song do you want to do? And the only one I knew the name of was Animal. So I said that. And he was like, do you know it? I was like, not really. And he goes, all right, go in the room. We'll play it once, jam over it, and then you'll record it. And then we'll send that video to Travis Barker and see what he thinks. So I was like, all right. And I guess I should have been more nervous because it was a gnarly situation to be thrown into. But at the same time, I kind of just had to sum it up like, well, this is why you've been practicing 5 hours a day. So I did it, came out. They were stoked on what had happened. And then I do remember after like 10 minutes later, my heart started like going crazy. It was almost like it didn't hit me till everything was good. Yeah, I don't know why, like physically. But then that band, so that had happened. And then we were trying to figure out who the guitarist would be. And Jason had asked, and right away, and he might have already had this in his head, but right away I was like, we should hit up Stevis, because I had been familiar with Stevis's work in the Chariot, but I'd only met him once. And he was really cool when I met him. But he was like, yeah, I could be sick. He's like, I was kind of thinking that anyway or whatever. So called Stevis. He came down and they were like, we're going to do a tryout. And I was like, do I need to learn anything? And he was like, no, Steve's just going to like play. And I was like, screw that. I'm learning these songs anyway. Yeah. So I learned them. And then right when Steve got there, before he even got to do anything, we were playing for like labels. Like we didn't even know like what was going to happen, if it was going to sound good or whatever. And then from there, it just kind of like went crazy because the show ended up being what it was, and a lot of other factors. I'm not trying to act like it was just that, but I know that for us, as far as like pushing each other and then everything else, the show made a big difference for us, because when all these people were seeing it for the first time, they were like, where did you get these 3 people that are climbing up the walls and front flipping into the drum set and whatever else? And for us, we grew up skateboarding. We grew up looking up to the same bands like At the Drive-In and all that stuff. And so we knew the show that we always wanted to put on. And I hate the word show, because I've been performing, like jumping out of my seat, even when I was in my room by myself when I was 15. And I know those 2 dudes did the same thing. But when we get on stage, it was always like, we kind of like push each other. And so it's like skating with your friends. Like you see one guy jump a 10 stair, and up to that point, you guys have only jumped 6 stairs. So then somebody else does it, and then somebody's like, well, I'm gonna jump a 12 stair, and it just escalates. And it's felt like that on stage for a very long time. And this is a long answer. I'm sorry. Let me get to your point. So for me, I felt like the artistic side of it that I had never gotten with the guys from Night Versus was the live show. Like when it comes to music, Night Versus is everything that I love, and I never feel like I'm missing something. But with Fever, my whole life I had imagined getting to play big stages where I could climb a truss that's 30 feet up or front flip into the crowd or whatever. And I think when we were young, we kind of pushed trying to do that, but it started to get to the point where like, all right, we need to play our parts right. Like we can't just be screwing around on stage if we're going to write material this complex. So Fever, it was like my opportunity in life to get to indulge in that aspect of a musical performance. So that was like the big draw for me. And I was like, all right, let's do this. And maybe they were cool. Like at the beginning, it was very fun. So went into it, and it was really like, I was so excited. It was cool. But when I look back at what I was doing at the time, it was kind of fucked up. Like the amount of like I would be, and shout out forever. I'm forever grateful to Nick and Riley for putting up with that era of me being gone, because they were still trying to tour full time and I was splitting all of my time. And there was definitely a moment where like, it was shitty for them, and I was doing my best, but I'd committed my whole life to just them. And it was the first time where I'm like, all right, I'm going to get to try something that I've never done before. And they were cool and stuck it out. And like, we still write and we got through it. But there were moments where like, I would be on a tour with Night Versus, and we'd have a date, but like we're in the middle of a month tour, and I would fly from Oklahoma to Japan to play one show with Fever, and then fly straight back that night to play in Texas with Night Versus. So like I'd miss 2 shows, and they would have to play with drum tracks. I'm forever sorry to whoever went to those shows. And like there was times, like I remember we did a month-long run with Intervals, and they're from Toronto, and we were in New York, and I had a show in Vegas that was like a radio showcase with Fever. So I flew home or from New York to Vegas. It's like 3 hours from home, played that show, then flew back that night to Toronto, played the next day in Toronto, and then drove with Nick and Riley all the way back from Toronto to California, even though I was like 3 hours from home. But I mean, again, it was a tough time for me because I was so excited, but I'm like, I've got my best friends and I don't want to do anything to ruin that. So I tried my hardest to be at 2 places at once, and we got through it, but it was really, really, like, just physically it was really hard. Like I got fucked up sometimes, like just from trying to play, like headbang that much and not having sleep and being on a plane for like hours and hours on end. So it was like I don't know if I'll ever be able to push myself as hard as I did those first, but from what was that, like 2016 to 19, like those 3 years were like everything I physically could give to everything.
Well, I mean, that's the time to do it. You're young and you're able, you know, you're how old were you back then? Like 2016?
Like 27, 28, because I'm going to turn 33 in a couple days.
Nice.
So that was like the end of
your 20s.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, I'm glad that I got it in, because I couldn't do that. Like physically, I just couldn't do it now. Like if I have like the right preparation, I'm good, but just going like that and the food that I could afford to eat and everything else, like I probably killed 5 years of my life in those 3 years, 3 years of just trying to figure shit out.
Yeah, man. I'm so, you know, you get sick too, just all that travel going, you know, in and out, and no matter how healthy you are or what kind of diet you have, like just putting your body through all that, eventually your body just goes, nah, fuck you.
Yeah, I felt that I felt that about halfway through, and I pushed through it, but there was definitely moments where I'm like, dude, in Night Versus, I never got sick like that, and I never got injured like that. And then trying to kind of double the workload. And then on top of that, doing like Fever, where the show is that much more elevated physically. It was a crazy time.
Yeah, man. I saw you guys with opening Knotfest. So I was out,
yeah.
I was out there doing the beer pit thing for them, and you know, Jason always also, by the way, Jason, who's a maniac, runs, and, you know, I've seen him with Let Live running into the crowd. I got one show in some festival, he like ran into a lake that was like,
I heard about that.
like lunatic. But, you know, it's just, I saw the incorporation of the skateboarding too. Like he started doing skateboarding tricks on stage. Like, I mean, it's such a good show to see live. And I know you said you don't like using the word show because you're not.
No, I mean, I'm not offended by it, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. You're not doing it with the intention of putting on like a show, like a circus or something. But it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's beautiful to watch.
Thank you. And I get like a lot of that stuff is very unnatural for people. Like people don't normally sit on a drum set and just go, I'm going to jump. I just know that when I was watching like Big Day Out footage of At the Drive-In and Omar was like flailing around the stage, I was like envious of that. Like I was like, why did I pick the one instrument where you have to sit? And so I was just like, whatever, I got to find a way to express myself the way that I feel when I listen to this music. But I could see how like if you drum your whole life and you see it, you're just like, why is this dude jumping out of his seat? What does he need more attention or something? But for me, it's just, that's the only way I want to play on stage. I don't want to just, I mean, depending on the gig, right? If I was playing for Bjork, I probably wouldn't be jumping out of a seat. But for the music that we were putting on, that just felt natural to me. Yeah,
for sure. 100%. I wanted to ask you too about playing with Seth Meyers.
Oh yeah.
We've never met or spoken before. Like, even though I've been to a bunch of Night Versus shows and I'm friends with Nick, for some reason we just never crossed paths. But I still felt proud, if that makes any sense. Like when I saw you on Seth Meyers, I'm like, oh my God, yes. So how did that come about?
There is this amazing guy named Eric Lederman that works for the Seth Meyers show. And initially, when they had formed the show, Fred Armisen, who's one of my favorite comedians, was the guitarist and then drummer. And I think at a certain point, it was just like with his schedule, he couldn't keep it up. So Eric had the really innovative idea of suggesting that they get guest drummers. And obviously, it's not just Eric in the sense that like Seth had to approve it, the band had to approve it. I mean, it's a lot for a band to have to deal with a new drummer every week. So everybody involved was a part of this, but Eric ultimately was the one that was like, let's try this out. And he pushed even to get like the drummers' names in the intro credits and stuff. So it's really cool because he is a drummer. He grew up drumming before he started to do that job. And it's like, in a lot of ways, the art is moved to like sort of a backseat because so much modern music doesn't use real drums, and a lot of bands that should have real drums program their drums. So the fact that Eric has gone out of his way to bring like real drummers, like he's got people like Danny Carey and Abe from Deftones and Dave, what's his name? Vinny Caliuta and I don't know if Dave Weckler's been on the show yet, but anyways, he's getting the best drummers in the world and he's putting them on national television. So he had reached out to me a couple of years ago, but his big thing was like, you should probably do it when you're promoting an album release. And so I waited, and then pandemic happened and he was like, you don't want to do this at home. Like, let's do this when you can fly out. So I still hadn't had a release other than the piece that I did with Justin Chancellor from Tool. So I was like, all right, well, let's just promote this. And then I came out and, it was such a cool experience. The band was amazing, great taste in music. They loved The Cure. So we talked about that a lot in like that era. And Seth was great. The guests were super cool. And I'd been around television because my dad worked on Married Children. And so for me, I know how important it is to keep a show running smooth. So it was like the whole objective when you're playing there is to like start your fills and end right when the guest sits down and like get all your cues perfectly. So it's weird. It's different than anything we've ever really done, because normally in a song, it's like you end when the song ends or you improvise and then the musicians cue, but it's like you're working almost with this outside factor. So for me, I just wanted to never mess up and like nail it, and everything went smoothly. We actually ended up improvising a few of the songs towards the end, but Eric in the end, he was like, dude, you could have thrown like, some crazier parts if you wanted. And I was like, next time. But right now, I just want to make sure that it feels like a rehearsed house band. So it was cool for me because there's a different kind of pressure and a different sort of approach to playing music that I'd never really done before. So it was really, really cool. And I'm super thankful that they asked.
Yeah, man. And it felt natural watching it. And even when you were on the mic talking, like it felt like, oh, you belong there. Like you've done this before.
That's cool to hear. The first night I was super focused. And I remember when we hit the final song, Aric was like screaming death metal vocals in my in-ears as we were like jamming out. So I know I started like laughing towards that point because it's like such a chill vibe, and he's just here like calling for a wall of death in my ears while the studio audience is like chilling, enjoying it. It was fun.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So you've worked with so many artists. You mentioned Justin Chancellor and you Seth Meyers and all these artists. I know also I saw video clips of you jamming out with, or I don't know if you were jamming, but you were in the studio with DJ Lethal, who's a friend of mine as well.
Oh yeah, you saw that? Yeah. He's awesome.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we became friends very weirdly, just kind of over email, and then he just invited me to the studio, and he always has like a rotating door of people coming in and jamming with him and doing stuff.
Yeah.
But how did that come about? Like you working with him and trying to do stuff? Or I don't know, did you do stuff or were you just there chilling?
Nah, we wrote like a song that I think was supposed to be for Lana Del Rey or something. I don't know. I don't think it ever got used, but like that's part of the process. You just write stuff and send it out and see if people are into it. And I love DJ Lethal because of the fact that he, like, don't get me wrong, like I listened to Limp Bizkit growing up, but when you think about his involvement in House of Pain, it's like this dude has created some of the most iconic beats in the history of time.
Yep.
Like it's crazy. So it was so cool to get to work with him. But for me, I don't know, man, I've been sort of in and out different facets of the industry, and I never feel like I'm fully in one or the other. It's like I've done studio work and I've backed bands before that were mine and weren't mine, and I've toured and I've done educational stuff, whatever else. Like I've tried to kind of test everything out, even if I thought it wouldn't be for me. I just wanted to know for myself. And one of the things that I found is that a lot of session work is like not the experience I like in music. It's very like, especially now, man, I've worked with so many people that just straight rip songs. They just will be like, oh, I want the beat from this Depeche Mode song. And so they ask you to play it and you're getting paid and you do it. And then their engineer's like, oh, I have those synth tones. And then they reverse the chord progression. All of a sudden you just have Personal Jesus, but with new vocals. And like that side of music, although it pays well, is very unappealing to me. It's not for me, and I've tried it. So when I met people that I knew were creative, that I knew had something different to say on their instrument, I always tried to come up with a way to work together. And I think that started because, like I was saying before, when I used to have 5 hours a day at home, I took advantage of it. But when I went on tour, I was like, oh crap, I don't have that time. So how do I take advantage of this? And one of the first things I thought of was, well, I'm traveling, so I'll do something with that. So I did the Drum Around the World series for GoPro, where I would drum in different locations. The other thing I realized was this is the first time I get to meet professional musicians on a regular basis. So I did this thing a few years back called the Drum Chain, where all the drummers that I had met that I was like really, really into their playing, I asked to play on a song together, and then Nick and Riley composed around their parts. So the first one, I just gave a BPM, like it was like 140 BPM, play this many bars. And then once I got all the submissions, I had like Billy from Dillinger Escape Plan, I had Mike from Protest the Hero, a lot of really talented people, Lonnie from Let Live, and Alex Bent, who now plays in Trivium. And we made this piece, and it was so exciting for me. Because it's like, I'm like, cool, this is something I never got to do before this. And I can't say that that's never happened, but up to that point, I had never seen it. So now post-COVID, there's like hundreds of these videos where you've got like 10 guys playing on the same song. But at that time, I was unaware of it. So it felt new, at least for me, in the sense that I didn't have a reference to copy. I was just like, let's see what happens. So we put the drums together, Nick and Riley recorded over it. And the first one actually did pretty well. Like I know like Devour and all these other websites had kind of covered it as like this exciting piece to see 9 drummers on one song, and and I liked it because it gave each of them an opportunity to play exactly what they want. I know each band's dynamic is very different, So sometimes you can be a great drummer, but you don't really have the option to write all of your favorite parts because you're working with so many people. From that experience and how eager everybody was to be part of it, and like how they did such a good job, after seeing that, I was like, okay, I want to do this in other places. So I did a collaboration with Monkey from Korn and Raw from Suicidal Tendencies. And it was like, I built all these took all these sounds because I was really inspired by Foley art. Because I'm a film and television major. So Foley art, the art where they basically like come up with the sounds behind all the different effects live. Like when you hear thunder and it's them shaking a sheet, like sheet metal or whatever. So I built a song around that, all these sounds I made, and then had Raw play over it and then Monkey jam over it. And from that, like there was no plan to make money. There was no like objective for a single. There was not context for like a reference beforehand. Like, oh, I want it to be like this. It was just like, hey, come here, let's make something. And once it's all like laid down, I'll put it together the best I can and edit the video to kind of like visually represent it. And it was so fun because it was just creating again. It wasn't asking someone to come into the studio and make this song that needs to get played this much or what, you know what I mean? All the things that I was saying I don't like about session work, I got to do the opposite of that with that. So then I did that same thing with Justin. I built this room full of mirrors, or this room of mirrors at the beginning of quarantine, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with it yet. And I had recorded a solo in it, but it felt like incomplete. Like I was like, this is cool, but I think it needs something else. And so I'd reached out to Justin because we had met on tour at the festival runs that we were doing with Fever. And he was like, I don't even need to see it, I'll do it. And I was like, we're the best. Nice. So he sent me a lot of his ideas and we talked about it, and it was over that solo. And then he found some cool stuff. We rearranged a little bit. He learned it, came down and recorded. And like, it was cool because I didn't think about this, but he had said that he had never been in a music video before. This was like his first music video he'd ever gotten to perform in because Tools are all animated.
Right.
So it was kind of a trip because for me, I'm obviously stoked. Tools one of my favorite bands growing up still. And to have him be so cool and be down was awesome. But the fact that he was that excited to just create, and like he ended up bringing he stands on like this rotating glass platform, and he had that built. And I was like, dude, you didn't have to. He's like, well, it's the most important thing I got going on right now. And like, he was so cool. And I think, again, just the idea that it was just going back to creating without context, just whatever happens, let's make it the best we can. So I have a lot more planned with other people, but that process for me is really rewarding because, again, it's like you get in a cycle where like you've got album expectations, or like somebody wants to make money off the song, or somebody wants to make sure their name is higher up on the top on list. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I just want to make cool stuff with people that I think are talented. So that's kind of why it's been that way. And I want it to always change, but and work with different people, but I hope to just continue that for as long as I'm playing drums.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah, Justin's great, dude. What a nice guy. I met him at Intronaut show.
Oh, really?
I think it was like Slide Bar, maybe up in like northern LA. Fullerton, yeah.
Well, Slide Bar is like, we grew up like 10 minutes from there.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I mean, I went to go just to see the homies at Intronaut, and he was just hanging out. And maybe I'm thinking of the wrong venue, but whatever. It was definitely an Intronaut show, and it was a small venue, and he was just super nice. I'm like trying not to punish. I'm like,
right.
Hey, I like your band. And we just sat there and talked for like an hour over a couple beers. Like I thought he's just the greatest.
Yeah. And he's got great taste in music, and he's so open-minded. It's like, again, it's so refreshing to work with people like that, especially because I saw Tool a couple months later, and it's like all of a sudden you're reminded, oh yeah, this is one of the most unique, influential bass players on the planet. But when you hang with him, you just feel like hanging with the dude, you know?
Yeah. Is there anyone that you haven't worked with that's kind of like a bucket list for you?
Yeah, I got a bucket list of 10 people.
Really?
Yeah, I write everything down before I mean, I'm very like,
your vision board kind of guy?
My notes are my most used app, second to my voice memos, but it's all like organized lists of things that I need to do before the stage and whatever else.
Nice.
I would have had, obviously, rest in peace. I would have had Kobe because Kobe was like one of the biggest, he's probably one of the biggest influences on my life. Growing up in LA, and just his work ethic is the reason I started practicing 5 hours a day. But musically, Bjork's at the top of the list. Omar, who played in Mars Volta and At the Drive-In. DJ Shadow would be unbelievable. Michael from Opeth. Opeth's one of my favorite bands of all time. And Flea's on there. And these are just people that really made me rethink their instrument. Like when I was a kid, I had an idea of what DJs do, and I had an idea of what bass players do or guitarists do, and then you hear their work and you're like, oh my God, there's this whole other world. And none of those people compromise what they're doing. Like they figured out their own musical identity at a very young age and found a way to live off of it and like just like not deal with anybody's BS of telling them what to do. And that's always been so intriguing to me, and the confidence in knowing who you are. Because I'm big on the fact that like if you believe in something enough, you don't need other people to agree with you. Like
right.
You go do that, and if other people tell you that's wrong or you shouldn't do that, it's not going to make you successful, then like they can go do that. You do what you want to do. And all those people were, I guess, influences on me in seeing that sort of approach to this art and then just like living it, you know? So I'm trying to think of what else is on the list, but I have a list of 10 people because I was like, 10 is solid, you know, like that's, I feel like in the next 20 years, I should be able to pull off some of it. I mean, who knows, right? But
you're definitely on track, brother. You're definitely on track.
If I could pull off any of these, it would make me feel like I did the right thing, you know? And all of that to be said, like I would always want it to be something where it was interesting to them as well. Arca's on that list, actually. Arca's a producer that actually just did the I think it was the second to last Bjork release. But in general, like, I don't know. I mean, I always feel very responsible, right? So it's like, if I'm not making work that intrigues them yet, then I hope I get to the point with what I have in mind of the projects I have coming up to where eventually they see it and they go like, oh, this is something I would be interested in. Let's see what we can do with this approach to the drums or visual art or whatever else.
You're definitely on track, man. I mean, you're still young, and it keeps getting exponentially bigger and bigger. Every time I see, you know, a new thing from you, it's like a bigger thing. Like I know that anything you set your mind to, you're going to pull it off. So I'm excited. I'm excited for you. Yeah, like I said, you know, sometimes I get a little bummed out because I just turned 40. And I'm like, oh my God.
Congratulations, by the way. That's a big milestone.
Yeah. I'm surprised I'm here too. But yeah, when you hit 40, you start having that like midlife crisis, depression where you're like, oh no, I'm getting old and whatever. But I started thinking about it. I'm like, man, presuming that nothing bad happens accident wise, I got another 40. 80 is a good age. I think that my grandfather passed when he was 82. Like, I'll probably make it to 80. That's another 40 years. Like, that's a whole other my life, like that I already just did. And that's totally. You've got so much time and all and like you said, you're practicing and creating, so you're gonna achieve all of that for sure.
Well, I appreciate hearing that, but also to your point, like even the fact that you're open to creating something like this podcast where you have different personalities and perspectives and you're sort of getting to stay relevant with the evolution of modern art, you know, that's the type of stuff that keeps you learning. Because I think it's hard for people when you hit 40, it's very easy to be like, look, I know this is what pays my bills. I know this is the food I like to eat. I've got to take care of my family, and nothing wrong with that. But I think that you sort of stop evolving, whereas you doing and something like a podcast where you're talking to people that you are, I think is going to keep you learning, and you're just going to get better and better at what you do. And like you're saying, you'll have that second life to kind of take advantage of it. Whereas I think a lot of people, they'll hit 40 and they're like, I'm just going to be doing this till I retire and then I'm chilling.
Yeah, for sure. I can't do that. I have a really difficult time with days off. And I know it's not healthy, but I don't care. Like I can't. My brain doesn't let me have a day off. Like if I ever do have a day where there's nothing on the agenda and I'm sitting on the couch, I'm like, well, time to figure something out to do, because I can't just sit here and do nothing. So, yeah. The last couple things I had here for you was I saw the clip of you practicing to play a show with like 1,000 drummers.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, that's insane. That's got to be the loudest show ever.
It actually, because of the acoustics of the stadium, it weirdly wasn't. Like, I have pretty sensitive ears. I've destroyed them because I didn't use earplugs for the first 12 years. And it wasn't as bad as I thought. But that's this group called the Rockin 1000. So what it is it's very interesting. It's actually like this really organic art project that turned into this massive piece. But basically, there was a small town in Italy and they wanted the Foo Fighters to come play their city, but their city was not big enough to normally draw that kind of an act. So they came up with the concept of having 1,000 people cover a Foo Fighters song. That video went viral. Dave Grohl saw it, the band came, and it was like this cool moment in that city's history, right? And it was like something that had never really been done. So then I guess all of these people started reaching out. There are people that wanted to be a part of it. All of a sudden, all these like publicists were like, "Hey, can you do like a Bruce Springsteen cover? Can you do this?" And they were so cool. They're like, you know what? Like, that was a special moment. We're not trying to just be, this band that you hire for the promo of your new album, but because there are so many musicians all over the globe that are interested in this, we'll turn this into something. And so what it evolved into was these stadium shows where they cover like 2 hours worth of music with 1,000 musicians. So there's 300 drummers in the ensemble, and then a ton of bass players, ton of singers, and each group has a leader that sort of like guides them through. Mm-hmm. And they had reached out to me like a month ago, and it was kind of tough because I had the Seth Meyers show, very little time in between, and then was leaving for Fever's tour, and I'm trying to finish writing Night Versus record. So I was a little bit hesitant, not because I wasn't interested, but because I'm just like, I don't ever want to say yes to something unless I know I can do a good job. And I was like, well, if I come out there, can we try something new? And they were like, well, what do you have in mind? And I was like, well, I would love to do a call and response. Because at first they were like, you can just come out, jam with the band, maybe you play a couple songs live, whatever. And I was like, I want to do something where like I play and we have 300 drummers on the spot try and respond that back to me, and we see what it feels like and sounds like. And it's so rare for an organization that's that massive. I mean, think about how hard it is to get like 5 dudes in a room on the same page with instruments, let alone 1,000. The fact that they were like, yeah, we'll carve out time in our rehearsal to try this thing out, to me was so inspiring, because I'm like, thank God there are still groups this big that are willing to try something new. They're not just set in their way of like, well, no, we have rehearsal and we got to be done at this time, whatever. So when they said yes to that, I was like, all right, I'm down. Flew out there, and they were a little concerned. They were like, did you write an easy call and response? And I'm like, I think I got a decent gauge of how to work with these drummers, because I used to teach drumming at the YMCA. So it's like I've worked with kids. These are, even if they're not all professional drummers, they're at least good enough to play these songs. And they killed it. It was super fun. So we did dress rehearsal. We ran a call and response and did some like cool like experiments. And then the night of the show was like, honestly, like nothing I've ever experienced. And again, when I first heard about this, not seeing the footage, I kind of thought like, is this going to be a disaster? Because I've seen 5 people sound bad. So I can't imagine 1,000. But dude, seeing 1,000 people play to 60,000 people and everybody singing the same words at the same time. It's like, imagine those moments at a show when everybody's in tune with the band and it's like the third chorus of the biggest song, and they put the mic out and you hear the audience and you get those like chills from it. It was like that for an entire night. And I honestly, like, I'm very unemotional with most things. Like I feel it myself, but like I don't like outwardly express it. Like I kind of try my best to save that for putting it into art and performance. But it was one of those things where like certain songs, when they would go to play it, it was almost annoying. It was like chopping onions, where you're like, dude, why is this making me feel this way? Like I'm looking next to me and people are just singing along. But for me to see that many people like moved by music, it's like an intense thing for me specifically. I don't know. And I felt that the first time that I went to the John Lennon Memorial, the Imagine mosaic that's laid out by where, like, it's like a block from where he was shot in Central Park. Because I remember I had like a day off on tour and I was chilling by myself, and just sitting there for a half hour and seeing like 200 people come by, and some people are singing from the age of 70 to 7. Some people are like taking photos, some people are crying, some people are like reciting lyrics, and I was just like, the idea that, like, with all of this stuff going on and people can't get along, can't agree with anything, the idea that somebody like one person like John Lennon can bring that many people together on a daily basis, even after they're gone, it made me feel that way. And so seeing this was the first time in a long time where I'd felt like there's something crazy going on here. So I know they're planning on expanding, and I hope that more people get to experience it, because I think they've only done France, Italy, and Germany, but it's a fucking trip to feel it. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, man, that's something that, and I'm sure there's people studying it, but I feel that there should be more efforts into studying the effects of music on people, because that is true what you're saying. Like, there's something you can't explain. It's a feeling that is almost overwhelming at times. I've gotten, thankfully, the opportunity to experience it. I've said it in the show before, but like, I used to do stage production, and I got the opportunity to work with like Billy Joel, or like, Aerosmith.
Damn, that's awesome.
Rod Stewart, and like Cream and The Who and all these people. And, just the one that sticks out the most was like Billy Joel. I was working the show day on stage with him, and I'm standing there just a few feet away from him, and the entire stadium is singing Piano Man back at him. And
that's gotta be insane.
All the goosebumps in the world. Like, I was just tears. I was just like, what is happening? And it's so fascinating to me that music can have that effect to unite people, and it creates that feeling. That's this like trippy feeling of like something's going on.
Totally. And I think I don't know if you've had this, but there are moments when I get a little, and I'm not discouraged. I'm trying to think of the right word, but like almost like a disconnect with the current generation's, what's the word? Like consumption of music, because I've talked to a lot of people about this because I'm curious. Like, again, I don't think there's a right way to enjoy art, but I know for me, and I would imagine for yourself, for people more of our generation, like I did not want to like a band unless I felt like it was something that I could tell everybody I liked. Like, don't get me wrong, you have your guilty pleasures, but like for me, if I was going to buy an album, I was going to listen to it 100 times through. 100's a lot. 10 times through, right? And like really decide, is this something that I want to keep with me for as long as I listen to music, and like I went to shows, like I wanted to put my body at risk to like jump off, like stage dive or sing until my like throat hurt, like whatever it was. Like, I took music so serious as a kid. And if somebody sang and they had a different perspective than me, I was curious what they were saying. I wasn't there going like, well, I think you should feel this way. Oh, I think you should do this. Like, I really wanted to feel like this was like this ethereal thing beyond me. And I've tried my best to maintain that, but so much of the current generation consume music in a different way. A lot of it's visual. A lot of it's based off of like, do I think they're funny on social media? And maybe if I was born at this time, I would be that way. But for us, it's like you just sat with the record and you imagined what this meant, and you found the best places in your life to play it. Like, I would skate with certain records that sounded better at night than day, or like when it rained, I knew these are the records I want to listen to, whatever. And so I don't know, man, like I take it as serious as somebody would religion, and it just in the sense of like how it affects me. And as I see a younger generation like go like, yeah, I don't know, I didn't really like the vocal production on this new single or whatever. I'm like, dude, I can't imagine at like 15 being like, oh, I would like this record, but I didn't like the vocal production. I was just like I'm like, whatever this artist has to say, I want to hear it and feel it and get it. And so when I see something like the Rockin' 1000, like it reminds me that there are still people that are moved by music in this way, because again, like there's no right way to consume this, but so much of the new stuff is just so different than how I feel about it. not better or worse, just different. And so seeing that, it's like that reminder that people feel that deeply about songs and artists and music in general still, you know?
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I'm a pretty easygoing person. I'm friendly with everyone I meet, and but if I meet people and they go, I don't really like music, my brain immediately just goes, oh, this isn't going to work out. We're not going to be friends.
I'm always so interested from people like that, because I'm like, well, what's the thing you get that does, like, what music does for me? Like, I'm like, what do you get in life that does that for you? Because I don't know, you know, but I know what you're saying, because you're all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, like 50% of the things I love, you just have no interest in.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm like, I'm so fascinated by that, because it's interesting when you ask people why with stuff that they've never thought about, like it's really interesting to see their reactions, because some people are just straight up honest, and some people like are trying to cover for how they feel and whatever else. And I don't know. I it's funny you say that, because I know what you mean. It's like shocking to hear, but at the same time, I'm like, what is it that you love then? Like,
yeah,
I'm sure there's something. Maybe it's film, maybe it's like Netflix series. I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting.
I just feel like they're serial killers. Like, I mean, it's not a matter of like genre. Like, if you say I don't like metal, like, oh, cool, whatever. What do you listen to? But no music, that's wrong. Like, okay, nope. Something's wrong. I gotta get out of here, because you're definitely like Dexter or something, you know. But dude, this is one of the longer episodes. Usually I cut it at an hour, but we did have that little editing point in the middle. But I had just the one last thing I had was like, what do you do diet wise and exercise wise to maintain, you know, your stamina and your endurance for your performances? Because you're, like I said, you're crazy live performances, and you know, you're in great shape. But I just don't know, like, do you go to the gym a lot? Because I feel like that would consume too much time.
No, I don't go to the gym. I just play every time I play drums. I play like I'm playing the show.
Okay.
I play like it's like my last show. So if I have, like, through all of quarantine, you can look at my Instagram. I got a lot of videos of me alone in a room screaming and jumping off stuff, because that's how I play drums. It's not like it's like I was saying, it's not something that I'm doing because, hey, now people are here. It's like, that is how I feel that instrument makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for some people, they're just like, why? But that has kept me in shape all these years. And it's like, I don't want to go on tour and feel like, oh my God, now I'm back to this. I mean, adrenaline is different. Adrenaline definitely screws with your stamina in weird ways. Like the first Slipknot show back, I remember being like, whoa, this is such a, I haven't had like I got almost like numb to stage adrenaline through those 3 years, because I was playing so much. It was just like more days than not.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I don't know. I mean, I try not to eat like an idiot, but there's definitely like months of my life where I'm eating out of airports and I'm having 2 Starbucks drinks a day, and that stuff's kind of hard to avoid at times. But in general, yeah, I mean, I play as much as I can, and if I have a free day, like when I'm on tour, I walk everywhere. Like if I have 11 hours in a city and I've never been there, I'll spend all 11 hours outside of the time at the show seeing as much as I can, because I've learned that these places close down. Mm-hmm. A lot of countries that I used to visit are very different from the beginning of tour till now. So I'm just trying to enjoy it while I'm still doing this. And any day that I have off, that like if I just crammed like 3 weeks on a project and it's done and all the stress is gone and it's complete, I'll spend that day like skating at the beach just to like enjoy some new record or something, and like get my energy out, but in a way that's not going to like spoil the experience of drumming even when I don't want to, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I guess I just am always trying to do stuff like it's going to be, this is going to sound cliche, but like it's going to be the last time I do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you never know, man. You know, and I know that it's not, people don't like hearing that. I tell people all the time, like, you never know when it's the last time. And the pandemic should have taught everyone this. Like, you never know what's going to happen. One day you wake up, it's like, hey, guess what? Everything is shut down. You're done for now. So you got to adapt. So definitely enjoy life to the fullest every day, because who knows when it's the last one.
Totally.
But on that note, man, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. I've been a fan for many years. I'm glad we finally got to chat and sit down and get to know each other a little bit.
Yeah, dude, I wish you would say hi if you're at a Night Versus show.
Well, I have high-fived you a couple times.
Okay.
Yeah. But we just never had a conversation, you know what I mean?
For sure.
But everybody that's watching and listening, please follow Aric on what I guess Instagram is the best option because of the videos and everything.
Yes, the most consistent probably.
Yes.
And it's just my name, Aric Improta.
Yep. Follow Night Versus at Night Versus. Check out Fever 333 if you haven't. I mean, I can't imagine that you haven't if you're watching this. But follow Fever. Follow the HexWave as well. Just check out the artwork that you're doing at HexWave, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But dude,
thanks so much for all. Like, I know it's a lot to plug, so I appreciate you throwing it all out there.
No, for sure. Please, support independent artists, especially super creative minds like yourself. I think it's important that people. I always, at that Knotfest show with Fever 333, I was hanging out with a bunch of the brewery guys for the beer pit thing, and they were like, "Oh, who's this band?" I'm like, "Dude, watch." Go watch it. Look at this. You need to watch this because it's people just there's so much going on and people get distracted. And this is the whole point of this show is just to get people to like, hey, for 5 minutes, for an hour, whatever time frame it is, just focus on these things that maybe you're letting slip by. Because like you said, you got to enjoy life every day like it's your last day. So thanks again, man. We'll hopefully hang soon. And are you in LA?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to be in and out of. I'm going to Europe 4 times this summer. But it's like we have 2-week gaps between everything. So I'm hanging at home between all those places like 2 weeks at a time.
Excellent, man. Well, we'll be in touch. I also host a show at the Comedy Store, so maybe one day you can come out and hang out.
Oh, dude, that would be awesome.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, we'll be in touch. Thanks again, everybody. Please follow Aric. Cheers.
Thanks, man.
Later.